My sister stood at our parents' dining room table and called my wedding a sad little potluck in the woods. And she said it with a smile, like she was doing me a favor by being honest. That was 3 months ago. She didn't know that the man I was marrying had just quietly signed a $380 million contract with the Department of Defense. She didn't know that her fiancé, the one she called a real provider, was 11 days away from being arrested by the FBI on 17 counts of federal mortgage fraud. And she definitely didn't know that on the same weekend she planned her lavish engagement party at the Ritz-Carlton Charlotte, I would be standing on a 200-acre private estate in the Blue Ridge Mountains, saying my vows in front of 2 federal judges and a room full of people who had actually built things that lasted. When my mother finally texted me from the hotel lobby begging to come in, I read her message twice. I thought about everything she had said, everything she had allowed, and then I typed back 2 words. Too late. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you have ever had someone in your own family treat you like the consolation prize, please hit like and subscribe. You are going to want to hear how this ended. I grew up in a nice house in Concord, North Carolina, about 20 minutes outside Charlotte. My parents, Donna and Frank, weren't wealthy, but they acted like they were. My mother had a thing for brand names and the opinions of neighbors. My father had a thing for numbers, specifically other people's impressive ones. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent 8 years following money through shell companies and falsified ledgers for a living. I know better than almost anyone that what people show you is rarely what they actually have. My younger sister Margot never cared about any of that nuance. She cared about the surface, and she was brilliant at curating it. She had always been the pretty one, the charming one, the one my parents bragged about at church. I was the reliable one, the one who came home for the holidays and quietly fixed the family's tax returns because my dad kept missing deductions. There was never a shortage of love in our house, but it was rationed. Margot got the lion's share. She knew it. She used it like a credit card she never planned to pay off. Reed came into my life at a conference in Raleigh. He was presenting on financial data security, specifically on how cybercriminals exploit gaps in mortgage processing systems. I was there for a forensic accounting seminar. We ended up at the same coffee station during a break and talked for 4 straight hours until the evening sessions were long over. He wore a gray pullover and cargo pants. He drove a 2017 Subaru Outback with a cracked rear bumper. He told me he ran a small cybersecurity firm that mostly worked with financial institutions and government contractors. Small, he said. Steady work, nothing flashy. I brought him to Sunday dinner about 4 months in. My mother shook his hand and immediately looked at his shoes. My father asked what kind of car he drove. Margot, who was already dating Spencer by then, sized Reed up in about 3 seconds and spent the rest of the evening ignoring him completely. Spencer, for his part, spent dinner telling everyone about a waterfront development he was closing in Myrtle Beach, dropping square footage numbers like breadcrumbs for pigeons. My father hung on every word. My mother kept refilling Spencer's glass before he could ask. We got married at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse on a Tuesday in March. Just the 2 of us and 2 witnesses, Reed's business partner and my closest friend from college. We went to a nice restaurant after. I wore a dress I already owned. My parents didn't know until a week later. My mother was hurt. She said I had robbed her of the moment. I told her we were going to have a proper celebration in June, a wedding weekend with family and close friends at a venue that mattered to Reed. She calmed down. She assumed this meant a rented hall somewhere with folding chairs and a DJ who took requests. She assumed a lot of things about my life that were spectacularly wrong. The dinner that changed everything happened on a Sunday in April. My mother had made pot roast. The table was set the way she always set it when she wanted things to feel important. The good china, the cloth napkins, the centerpiece she kept only for company. Margot arrived 20 minutes late in a white sundress, Spencer behind her in a linen blazer that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. They sat down and immediately took over the room the way they always did, loud and bright and impossible to look away from. I waited until everyone was settled before I brought out the weekend cards. Simple. The date, June 14th, and a note that Reed and I would be celebrating at a private mountain property near Asheville. A small group of family and close friends. Dinner Saturday evening, ceremony Sunday morning. I slid the cards around the table. My mother read hers and looked up at me the way she looked at incorrect change at a restaurant. Not angry, just mildly inconvenienced. She asked if it was, and I'm quoting, like a cabin situation. Spencer laughed before I could answer. He said it sounded very outdoorsy, like that was the worst thing a person could imagine. Reed sat beside me and said absolutely nothing. He poured himself more water. His face was completely calm. Then Margot set her card down gently and looked at me with that specific expression she had perfected, the one that managed to be sympathetic and pleased at exactly the same time. She said she had some news of her own. Spencer reached into his blazer and produced a ring box. The diamond was large enough to catch the overhead light from across the table. My mother gasped. My father stood up halfway out of his chair to shake Spencer's hand. When the noise finally settled, Margot said, very sweetly, that she and Spencer had already planned their engagement party for the weekend of June 14th. The Ritz-Carlton in Uptown Charlotte, 300 guests. They'd put down a $30,000 deposit. The room went quiet in a specific way that told me everyone understood what was being asked. My mother was the one who said it out loud. She told me the family obviously couldn't split up over a weekend, and that my little mountain dinner could happen any time, but the Ritz engagement party was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. She said it the way she might tell me to move my car out of the driveway. Problem solving. No room for my feelings in the math. My father said that Spencer had invited several of his business associates, and that it was a significant networking opportunity for people in this family. He said this to the table generally, but he was looking at Reed when he said it. Then Spencer leaned back and did something I hadn't expected. He pulled out his wallet, actual leather billfold, the kind that runs $400 at a department store, and produced a folded check. He slid it across the table toward me and Reed with 2 fingers, like he was sliding a poker chip. It was made out for $8,000. He said we could use it to book somewhere a little more appropriate, that there was no reason our celebration had to happen in the middle of the woods. He said it like he was being generous, like he was being kind. I looked at the check. I looked at my name spelled correctly in blue ink. Then I looked at Reed. He gave me the smallest nod. I slid the check back. I thanked Spencer. I said Reed and I were fully covered financially, but that I appreciated the thought. Then I said, very quietly, that as a forensic accountant I had an occupational habit of paying attention to financial news, and that I had noticed some unusual activity flags coming out of Coastal Meridian Realty, his development company, in the Federal Property Registry. I said it lightly, conversationally. The way you might mention you heard it might rain this weekend. The check disappeared from the table within about 4 seconds. Spencer's hand moved faster than I had seen him move all evening. My mother told me I was being embarrassing. My father told me to apologize immediately. Margot looked at Spencer with an expression I couldn't quite read, not alarmed, not confused, somewhere between the two. Reed and I left before dessert. The next morning, Margot had posted a story on Instagram calling me jealous and bitter. She didn't use my name, but she didn't need to. By noon, I had texts from my Aunt Roberta in Greensboro and my cousin Amber in Columbia calling me a troublemaker. My Uncle Glenn wrote a full paragraph in the family group chat saying I had attacked a successful businessman at the dinner table out of pure jealousy and that I owed Spencer an apology before I poisoned every relationship this family had worked to build. Not one of them called to ask what had actually happened. I screenshot everything, every text, every comment, every timestamp. Old habit, I keep receipts. I created a folder on my laptop and labeled it simply June 14. 3 days later, my father called. He told me that he and my mother had decided not to financially contribute to our celebration, since I had apparently decided to handle things on my own. He said this in the tone of a man delivering serious consequences. I had never once asked them for money. I had never expected it. Reed and I were paying for everything without their involvement. The threat was completely hollow, and we both knew it, but my father needed to say it because it was the only card he thought he had. I told him I understood and thanked him for letting me know. He paused for a beat too long. He had expected tears. Then he told me that my mother wanted Grandma's pearl earrings. My grandmother, my father's mother, had passed 4 years ago. She left those earrings to me specifically, written into her estate documents by her attorney. She had sat me down 6 months before she died and told me she wanted me to have them because I was, in her exact words, the one in this family who has a head on her shoulders. When the will was read, my mother had been reaching for them before the attorney finished the sentence. She was told they were mine. She had never fully forgiven me for it since. Now my father was saying that Margot wanted to wear them in her engagement photos. He said it was only appropriate that a piece of family jewelry go to the daughter, who was having the real celebration. He actually used that word. Real. I told my father I would think about it. What I actually did was call my jeweler. I had brought the pearl earrings in 2 weeks prior, before any of this had happened. I'd had the pearls removed from their original settings and restrung into a short pendant necklace, delicate, simple, the kind of thing I could wear every single day. The empty earring settings in the original velvet pouch were still in the drawer. The pearls themselves were sitting at my collarbone every morning when I got dressed. My mother called the following Tuesday and asked me to bring the jewelry box to Margot at the coffee shop near her apartment. Said Margot was too busy with wedding planning to make the drive. I said fine, I'd bring the box. Margot was already at the table when I arrived, oversized sunglasses pushed up on her head, iced coffee half finished. She barely said hello. She reached for the velvet pouch before I had even sat down. She pulled it open, she tilted it over the table. 2 empty earring settings clinked against the marble. She looked at me. I lifted the pendant at my collarbone with one finger. The 2 pearls caught the afternoon light through the coffee shop window. She stared at my necklace for a long time without saying anything, and then she said, very quietly, that I was a vicious person. I told her the earrings were mine, the pearls were mine, the decision about what to do with them was mine. I told her our grandmother left them to me because she knew exactly what she was doing. Margot didn't make a scene, she was smarter than that, or maybe just colder. She stood up, put her sunglasses on, picked up her purse and walked out. She didn't throw anything, she just left. And somehow that was worse. The call from Spencer came 20 minutes later while I was still at the table finishing my coffee. He didn't bother with a greeting. He said that after what I'd done to Margot, he had made some decisions. He had booked hotel rooms at the Ritz for our entire extended family, my aunt and uncle, 3 cousins, 2 friends my parents had known since I was in elementary school. Everyone who had been on the fence about the June 14th weekend was now firmly committed to the Ritz party. He said this like it was the closing argument in a case he had already won. I stood on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop and let him finish. Then I told him that sounded expensive, and that I genuinely hoped he enjoyed every single second of it. He said something about money not being a problem for him. I said I had absolutely no doubt it felt that way right now. I don't know if he caught the meaning in that. I hung up and texted Reed one sentence. They took the bait. Reed replied with one word, perfect. June 14th arrived on a Saturday with the kind of clear sky that makes you feel like the weather is cooperating on purpose. By 8 in the morning, black SUVs were already moving slowly up the private road that wound through the eastern face of the Blue Ridge toward the estate. The property belonged to Reed's business partner, a man who had built 3 cybersecurity firms and sold them all before he was 45. The estate spanned just over 200 acres of hardwood forest and mountain meadow. There was a stone main house, a catering pavilion, and a ceremony lawn that looked out over a valley filled with mountain laurel. Our guest list was smaller than Margot's 300. More specific, defense contractors, federal attorneys, 2 sitting federal judges who had known Reed for years, the man who had been Reed's first investor back when the company operated out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Durham. People who moved quietly and built things that lasted, people who did not need to announce what they had. I got dressed in the main house in a room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the valley. My dress was ivory silk, no beading, no train. The pearl pendant sat at my collarbone. My makeup artist worked in near silence, and it felt like peace. Real peace, not the absence of noise, but the presence of something solid underneath you. 40 minutes south in uptown Charlotte, things were going differently. Spencer had arrived at the Ritz early. He liked to be first at events he was hosting. The champagne tower was arranged, the ballroom was set, the photo booth had a neon sign. Everything looked exactly like the engagement party of someone who had a great deal of money. The event coordinator came to find him at 10:15 with the professional expression of someone delivering a problem. She told him the final payment, $62,000 for the ballroom and catering, had failed to process. 3 different cards, tried twice each. She was very sorry. Did he have another method of payment? Spencer excused himself and stepped into the hallway. He made 4 calls in 8 minutes. The 4th went straight to a voicemail that had been disconnected. When you operate the way Spencer operated, moving funds through overlapping LLCs, recording falsified property appraisals, collecting mortgage disbursements on homes that didn't appraise for what he claimed, there comes a moment when the structure stops holding weight. Federal agents had arrived at Coastal Meridian Realty's Charlotte office that morning with a search warrant, computers, hard drives, the contents of the conference room filing cabinet. His accounts had been frozen as part of an asset preservation order, signed by a federal judge at 7:46 a.m., all of them. At the same time, he was trying to explain this to the Ritz coordinator when his phone lit up with a CNN push notification. The headline read, "Charlotte developer arrested on 17 counts of federal mortgage fraud, scheme totaling $47 million, investigators say." His photo was right beneath the headline, the one from the Coastal Meridian website, the linen blazer, the easy smile. My Aunt Roberta saw it first. My cousin Amber put her mimosa down without finishing it. One by one, the family members Spencer had flown in and put up at the Ritz opened their phones in various corners of the hotel and read the same words. The collective silence that followed was the loudest thing that had happened all morning. Margot was in the bridal suite when Spencer came through the door. She knew from the way he walked that something was wrong. She had never seen him move like his legs weren't quite communicating with his brain. He sat down on the edge of the ottoman and put his face in his hands. By 11:15, the Ritz event manager had voided the ballroom contract due to payment failure. The setup crew began striking the tables, the champagne tower came down, the neon sign went back into its box. The extended family and out-of-town guests Spencer had arranged were now standing in the lobby with their luggage, reading the news on their phones, slowly understanding that there was no party, no dinner, and, they would discover this shortly, no return transportation, because the charter buses had also been canceled when his accounts were flagged. My mother was in the lobby when it finally broke through to her. My Uncle Glenn held his phone up and showed her the headline. Amber told me later that my mother's face went through 5 expressions in the span of 3 seconds. She watched my mother open her contacts and scroll to my name. My mother texted, "Clara, honey, there's been a situation here. Are you still celebrating today? We would love to come up to Asheville and be there for you." I was standing in the ceremony lawn in the shadow of the mountains when my phone buzzed in the pocket of my dress. The string quartet had just shifted into the processional. Reed was at the end of the aisle under an arch of mountain laurel and white ranunculus, waiting for me, looking at me the way he always looked at me, like I was the most important variable in any equation he had ever worked. I pulled my phone out, read my mother's text. Put it back in my pocket. I walked down the aisle. We said our vows in the afternoon light. When the officiant pronounced us married, a quiet applause started near the back of the crowd and grew until it filled the whole valley, or at least it felt that way. Reed held my face in both hands and kissed me like we had all the time in the world. Which we did. The reception was full of real laughter. No one performed anything. The food came from a chef who normally worked private events in the DC corridor. The wine was from a vineyard Reed's partner had a stake in. People toasted us genuinely, with things they actually meant, and it felt nothing like any family dinner I had ever sat through. Late in the afternoon, I took my phone out again. My mother had sent 4 more messages. The last one read, "We are outside the front gate. The security guard will not let us in. Please, Clara, we are family." I walked to the edge of the lawn where I could see the tree line at the bottom of the drive. Through the iron gate, I could just make out 2 cars and a cluster of people standing in the gravel. My mother in her floral blouse, my Aunt Roberta with her arms crossed. Margot, still in the white dress she had planned to wear to her engagement party, sitting on the hood of a rental car with her shoes off. Reed had given the security team explicit instructions 3 days before the event. If anyone claiming to be my family arrived without credentials, they were not to be admitted. They were not to be threatened. They were simply to be told that the guest list was final. That was all. I stood at the edge of the lawn and looked at them for a long moment. They looked smaller than I expected, or maybe I just felt larger than I used to. I thought about every Sunday dinner, every quiet assumption, every moment I had been asked to shrink so that Margot could expand into the space I gave up. I thought about my grandmother, who had seen me clearly when almost no one else did, whose pearls were sitting at my collarbone right now and would be there for the rest of my life. I didn't feel angry. I felt something closer to clean. I opened my mother's last message and typed back 2 words. Too late. I hit send. Then I went to my contacts and blocked her. I blocked my father, I blocked Margot, I blocked my Aunt Roberta, my Uncle Glenn, my cousin Amber. One by one, without ceremony, without any particular feeling except a deep and quiet certainty, I removed myself from the family group chat. I archived the folder labeled June 14 and forwarded it to my attorney with a short note. Then I put my phone in my clutch and went back to my husband. Reed was near the catering tables talking with one of the federal judges. When he saw me walking toward him, he said something brief to the judge, shook his hand and turned around. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was genuinely good. He smiled, that slow, certain smile that had been the same since the first afternoon in Raleigh, and held out his hand. I took it. We walked back into the mountain evening together, into the warm light and the sound of people who had actually chosen to be there. The next morning we were on a private flight out of Asheville Regional. 2 weeks, I won't say where. It was quiet and it was ours, and it was nothing like anything anyone in my family would have imagined for me. I sat by the window as we lifted off and watched the Blue Ridge fall away below us, those long green ridges and the soft valleys between them, and somewhere down there, a closed iron gate and a gravel road and a white dress sitting on the hood of a rental car. If you are carrying the weight of a family that has measured your worth by how shiny the life beside yours appears, I want you to hear this directly. You do not owe anyone access to what you have built. Forgiveness is something you can carry quietly inside yourself without ever opening the door again. The moment they recognize your value is the same moment their judgment of you becomes completely irrelevant. Your grandmother knew. Your real people know. The ones who don't, let them stand at the gate. Let them read the news on their phones in a hotel lobby while the champagne tower comes down around them. Let them figure out their own ride home. Your job is to walk down your aisle, say your vows in the mountain light, and send back exactly 2 words when the time comes. I promise you, it will feel like the most peaceful thing you have ever done in your life. If this story touched something real in you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Bunny Revenge. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from today. I read every single one. And if you have ever had to close a door on someone who only came knocking once they saw what was on the other side, tell me about it below. You are not alone in this, not even a little bit.